Amara still remembered the excitement she felt on the day she married Kwami. The entire village celebrated their wedding beneath colorful cloth decorations hanging between mango trees. Women danced. Children ran through the compound laughing. Elders blessed the union. Kwami was hardworking then. Or at least that was what everyone believed. He worked as an accountant in the nearby town and earned more than most men his age. People admired him. Mothers pointed him out as an example to their sons. Amara felt proud walking beside him. For the first few months, life seemed peaceful. Then she noticed something strange. Every month on payday, Kwami disappeared immediately after work. By evening he would return home with empty pockets. At first Amara assumed he had paid bills or invested in something important. One evening while preparing dinner she asked gently, "Kwami, where does your salary go every month?" Kwami didn't even look up. "I send it to my mother." Amara smiled politely. "All of it?" "Yes." The answer surprised her. She thought perhaps he was joking. But he wasn't. Every month. Every single cedi. The entire salary. Sent directly to Mama Efua. Amara remained silent. She respected family. She respected elders. She respected mothers. But she also noticed something troubling. The rent still needed payment. Food still needed buying. Water still needed carrying. And somehow all those responsibilities were quietly becoming hers. Whenever she asked about household money, Kwami repeated the same words. "My mother sacrificed everything for me. I owe her." Amara nodded respectfully. Yet every night she sat beside the small cooking fire wondering something she never spoke aloud. If he owes his mother everything, what exactly does he owe his wife? The question followed her into sleep. And each month the answer became more painful. 3 months later reality began showing itself. One evening Amara opened the kitchen storage container and froze. There was almost nothing left. A small cup of rice. A handful of beans. Half a bottle of cooking oil. That was all. She stared silently at the shelves. The emptiness felt heavier than words. Outside, neighborhood children played happily. Inside, she calculated how many meals remained. Not many. That evening Kwame returned from work smiling. His salary had arrived earlier that day. Amara felt hopeful. Perhaps this month would be different. Perhaps he would finally keep some money for their home. Instead she watched him take out his phone and complete another transfer. Everything. Again. To Mama Efua. "Kwame," she said softly. "We need food." He sighed immediately. The way people sigh when they don't want to hear a problem. "My mother needs support." "So do we." "My mother comes first." The words landed heavily between them. Not because he raised his voice. But because he didn't. He said them casually. As if it were obvious. As if his wife should already know her place. Later that night Amara ate the smallest portion and gave the rest to her husband. He never noticed. She lay awake listening to his peaceful breathing while her stomach remained empty. For the first time since their marriage, tears rolled quietly down her cheeks. Not because of hunger. Because of loneliness. She wasn't fighting another woman. She wasn't competing with his mother. She simply wanted a husband who remembered he had a family living under his own roof. But every month that family seemed invisible. Most people never heard Amara complain. That was part of the problem. She carried difficulties quietly. When neighbors asked how marriage was going, she smiled. When relatives visited, she served food politely. When elders checked on her, she said everything was fine. Because she believed marriage required patience. And patience was something she possessed in abundance. Every morning she woke before sunrise. She fetched water. Prepared breakfast. Cleaned the compound. Sold vegetables at the roadside market. Returned home. Cooked dinner. Then repeated everything the next day. Kwame rarely noticed. To him, things simply appeared. Clean clothes appeared. Food appeared. Water appeared. A functioning household appeared. He never stopped to ask how much work stood behind those appearances. One afternoon Amara fainted briefly at the market. The heat was intense. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. Another vendor helped her sit down beneath a tree. "You work too hard," the woman said. Amara smiled weakly. "I'm fine." The woman shook her head. "No, daughter. You're surviving. That's different." The words stayed with her. Because they were true. She wasn't living. She was surviving. And somehow nobody seemed to notice. Especially the one person who should have noticed first. One Saturday Kwame invited Amara to visit his mother. The journey took nearly 2 hours. When they arrived, Amara stopped walking. A beautiful new house stood before them. Fresh paint. Large windows. New furniture visible inside. Everything looked expensive. Far more expensive than anything she had imagined. Mama Efua welcomed them proudly. "Do you like my house?" "It is beautiful," Amara replied honestly. Then she noticed something else. A brand new television. A refrigerator. Even a generator. Meanwhile her own kitchen barely contained enough food for the week. Amara looked toward Kwame. He was smiling proudly. As if these purchases were achievements. As if he didn't see the contradiction. During lunch Mama Efra spoke proudly about renovations and improvements. Kwame listened happily. Amara remained quiet. Not angry. Not jealous. Just confused. How could a man build comfort everywhere except inside his own home? That evening they returned to the village. The contrast felt painful. Mama Efra slept comfortably in her modern house. Amara returned to leaking roofing sheets and empty shelves. Yet she still said nothing. Because some women carry disappointment silently until it becomes part of their daily life. That night Amara sat outside beneath the stars. The compound was quiet. Crickets sang in the darkness. Kwame slept peacefully inside. For a long time she stared at the moon without speaking. Then she made a decision. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Out of necessity. If nobody was going to secure her future, she would do it herself. She wouldn't argue. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't demand attention. Instead she would build something. Small at first. Almost invisible. A seed. Because every strong tree begins as a seed nobody notices. The next morning she woke earlier than usual. Before sunrise. Before the village stirred. Before even Kwame opened his eyes. And with the little money she had secretly saved from vegetable sales, she purchased 3 extra baskets of tomatoes. Nobody noticed. Not Kwame. Not the neighbors. Not even Mama Efua. But that tiny purchase marked the beginning of a story that would eventually surprise the entire village. Including the husband who believed she needed nothing. The next morning Amara arrived at the market earlier than usual. The sky was still dark blue. Only a few traders had begun setting up their stalls. She carried 3 extra baskets of tomatoes purchased with the tiny savings she had hidden over many months. It wasn't much. Most people would have laughed at the size of her investment. But Amara understood something important. Great businesses rarely begin with great money. They begin with great determination. She arranged the tomatoes carefully beside her usual vegetables. By midday every tomato had sold. Every single one. The profit was small. Very small. But when she counted the coins in her hand, something stirred inside her chest. Hope. Real hope. For months she had waited for someone else to improve her life. Now she had taken the first step herself. That evening she returned home smiling quietly. Kwame never noticed. He was busy discussing a new refrigerator his mother planned to buy. Amara listened politely while preparing dinner. Inside her pocket rested the first profit she had earned entirely for herself. Nobody celebrated. Nobody applauded. Nobody even knew. But that night she slept differently. For the first time in a long time, she felt movement. Forward movement. And sometimes the smallest step forward changes everything. Most people spend extra money quickly. Amara didn't. Every coin earned from her tomato sales went into a small metal container hidden beneath folded clothes inside her bedroom. She called it her future box. Nobody knew it existed. Not Kwame. Not neighbors. Not relatives. Every evening she counted her earnings carefully. Then placed them inside. 1 coin. 2 coins. 5 coins. 10 coins. The amount grew slowly. Painfully slowly. But it grew. Some days temptation appeared. The roof leaked during heavy rain. The cooking pot cracked. Her sandals tore apart while walking to market. Yet she still refused to touch the money. Because she wasn't saving for comfort. She was saving for freedom. There is a difference. Comfort solves today's problem. Freedom changes tomorrow. Meanwhile, Kwame continued sending his entire salary to Mama Efua every month. Nothing changed. Or at least that's what he believed. He never asked questions. Never noticed Amara leaving earlier. Never noticed her inventory growing larger. Never noticed customers beginning to ask specifically for her store. Because people rarely notice quiet growth. Not until it becomes impossible to ignore. Success often attracts doubt before it attracts respect. One afternoon, several market women watched Amara unloading additional produce. More tomatoes. More onions. More peppers. More customers. One woman laughed softly. Amara thinks she's becoming a businesswoman now. The others chuckled. Another woman shook her head. She's wasting her energy. Her husband earns enough money. Amara heard every word. But she said nothing. Because arguing consumes energy. Building creates results. Over the following weeks her store continued growing. Customers liked her honesty. She never cheated with measurements. Never increased prices unfairly. Never sold spoiled produce. People began recommending her to others. Soon customers traveled from nearby villages specifically to buy from Amara. The same women who laughed started watching more carefully. Success has a strange effect on people. At first they ignore it. Then they criticize it. Then they study it. And eventually they ask how you did it. Amara understood this. So she kept working quietly. One sale at a time. One customer at a time. One day at a time. 6 months later something extraordinary happened. Amara's savings reached an amount she never imagined possible. Not enough for luxury. Not enough for a house. But enough for opportunity. One evening an elderly farmer announced he was selling a small piece of unused farmland outside the village. Most people weren't interested. The land looked dry. Overgrown. Neglected. Others saw weeds. Amara saw potential. She visited the property alone. Walked through the tall grass. Examined the soil carefully. Listened to birds singing nearby. Then she smiled. This wasn't worthless land. It was ignored land. And ignored things often hide value. Within 2 weeks she purchased it quietly. The paperwork carried only her name. For the first time in her life, Amara owned something significant. She didn't tell Kwame. Not because she wanted secrets. Because she wanted certainty. Dreams spoken too early often attract doubt. Dreams protected quietly often become reality. As she stood alone on her new land watching sunset colors spread across the horizon, she felt tears fill her eyes. Not sadness. Pride. The kind of pride earned through sacrifice. The kind nobody can give you. The kind you build yourself. 1 year passed. Kwame never noticed anything unusual. That fact amazed nearly everyone except Amara. Because she understood something painful. People only see what they choose to see. Kwame saw his mother's needs. He saw her new furniture. Her improvements. Her comfort. But he rarely looked closely at his own wife. If he had looked, he would have noticed many things. The growing customer lines. The extra inventory. The confidence in her voice. The new farmland. The increasing respect she received at market. But he didn't. One evening he arrived home excited. "My mother wants to build another storage room," he announced proudly. Amara nodded politely. "That's good. I'll send extra money this month." Amara smiled gently. "Of course." Then she returned to writing figures inside her business notebook. Numbers. Sales. Plans. Growth. Kwame didn't ask what she was doing. He never even glanced at the pages. And that night, while he dreamed about helping his mother's future, Amara quietly planned her own. A future nobody saw coming. A future that would soon shock the entire village. Including the husband who believed she owned nothing. For years Kwame believed his salary would always arrive. Every month. Without fail. Like sunrise. Like rain. Like something guaranteed. Then one Monday morning, everything changed. He was sitting at his office desk when the manager called everyone into the conference room. The atmosphere felt strange immediately. Nobody smiled. Nobody joked. The manager's face carried the weight of bad news. "My friends," he began quietly, "the company is closing." Silence. Complete silence. Several employees stared in disbelief. Others looked down at the floor. Kwame felt his stomach tighten. Closing. What did that mean? The answer arrived quickly. Budget cuts. Financial losses. Layoffs. No more salaries. No more monthly income. No more guarantees. By afternoon, every employee received termination letters. When Kwame walked out of the building carrying a small cardboard box containing his belongings, the world suddenly felt different. The road home seemed longer. The sun seemed hotter. The future seemed uncertain. For the first time in years, fear entered his heart. Real fear. That evening he sat silently inside the compound. Amara noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" Kwame looked at her. Then handed over the termination letter. For several seconds she read without speaking. Finally she placed the paper down gently. "We will figure something out." Her voice remained calm. Steady. Supportive. Kwame nodded slowly. But inside his mind another thought repeated itself. If there is no salary, how will I continue sending money to my mother? The following morning Kwame called his mother. His voice sounded uncertain. Nervous. "Mama, I lost my job." A long silence followed. Then came a response he never expected. "What do you mean you lost your job?" "The company closed." Another silence. Longer this time. Kwame waited for comfort. For encouragement. For concern. Instead Mama Efwa asked only one question. "So there will be no money this month?" The words hit harder than unemployment itself. Kwame blinked slowly. "No, Mama." A disappointed sigh traveled through the phone. "I was planning another renovation." Kwame sat speechless. His mother continued talking about bills, projects, expenses, plans, but never once asked how he felt. Never once asked if he was okay. Never once asked what would happen to him. When the call ended, Kwame stared at the phone for a long time. Something uncomfortable settled inside his chest. For years he had sacrificed everything for her. Yet in his moment of need, her first concern wasn't her son. It was the money. Across the room, Amara watched quietly. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't criticize. She simply handed him a cup of tea. And somehow that simple gesture felt more comforting than the entire conversation with his mother. 2 weeks later things became worse. Much worse. One afternoon 3 men arrived at Mama Efua's house. They carried documents, receipts, loan records. Apparently the renovations had not been paid entirely with cash. Large debts existed. And now creditors wanted repayment. Mama Efua panicked. Immediately she called Kwami. "You must help me." Kwami rushed to her house. The situation looked serious. Very serious. Outstanding loans. Missed payments. Accumulating interest. The total amount shocked him. It exceeded everything he had saved. Everything. For years he had sent his salary faithfully. Yet somehow there was still debt. A mountain of debt. As he listened to the creditors explaining the numbers, a painful realization emerged. His sacrifices hadn't created security. They had funded endless spending. For the first time in his life, Kwame felt anger toward the situation. Not at his mother. Not yet. At himself. Because he had never asked questions. Never demanded accountability. Never protected his own future. He simply gave. And gave. And gave. Now the consequences stood directly in front of him. Demanding payment. That evening Kwame returned home defeated. His shoulders slumped. His eyes exhausted. The weight of unemployment and debt pressed heavily against him. Amara listened quietly as he explained everything. The job loss. The loans. The creditors. The panic. When he finally finished speaking, silence filled the room. Then Amara stood up. Without saying a word, she walked into the bedroom. Several minutes later she returned carrying a thick folder. Kwame frowned. "What is that?" Amara placed it gently on the table. "Open it." Inside were documents. Land ownership papers. Business records. Bank statements. Sales reports. Profit summaries. Kwame stared in complete disbelief. His eyes moved from one page to another. Then another. Then another. The numbers didn't make sense. At least not at first. Because they revealed something impossible. His wife owned farmland. His wife operated a successful business. His wife had savings. Substantial savings. Years of effort. Years of growth. Years of silent determination. All hidden beneath his nose. "You built all this," he whispered. Amara nodded. Slowly. Calmly. Without pride. Without arrogance. Just truth. "I had to." Kwame looked around the room. Suddenly he realized something painful. While he spent years building someone else's future, his wife had quietly built her own. News travels fast. Especially in small villages. Within days people learned the truth. Amara wasn't simply a market seller. She was a successful entrepreneur. The woman many ignored had quietly built something extraordinary. Customers increased. Respect increased. Opportunities increased. People who once laughed now spoke differently. Even the market women who mocked her ambition suddenly asked questions. How did you do it? What was your secret? Can you teach us? Amara answered politely. But her success wasn't the biggest story. The biggest story was Kwame. Because for the first time he saw his wife clearly. Not as someone who managed the house. Not as someone who cooked meals. Not as someone who quietly endured hardship. But as a remarkable woman. Strong. Intelligent. Disciplined. Visionary. Everything he should have noticed years ago. One evening he stood outside watching workers preparing part of Amara's farmland for expansion. The sunset painted the horizon gold. And a painful truth finally reached him. The woman he underestimated had become the foundation of their future. And now he faced the most important question of his life. Would she still want him beside her after everything? For several days after discovering Amara's secret success, Kwame struggled to sleep. Every night he lay awake staring at the ceiling. Thinking. Remembering. Regretting. The truth haunted him. For years he had believed money was the greatest gift a man could give his family. Yet he had given nearly all of it away. Meanwhile the woman beside him had built security, opportunity, and stability from almost nothing. One evening he visited the market quietly. Not as a customer. As an observer. He stood beneath a mango tree watching Amara walk. Customers greeted her warmly. Farmers respected her opinions. Traders asked for advice. Young women sought guidance. The respect she received was genuine. Not purchased. Not demanded. Earned. And for the first time Kwame understood something important. Money can buy comfort. Money can buy furniture. Money can buy houses. But respect must be earned through character. Amara had earned hers. Meanwhile he had spent years chasing approval. That realization hurt deeply. But sometimes pain is the beginning of wisdom. As he watched his wife confidently negotiate with suppliers and organize deliveries, a thought entered his mind. I never truly knew this woman. And somehow that truth felt heavier than any debt. A month later the situation with Mama Efua became worse. The creditors returned repeatedly. Bills continued piling up. The renovation stopped. The money was gone. And for the first time in years, Mama Efua faced consequences she could not avoid. One afternoon she arrived unexpectedly at Amara's house. The entire village noticed. People watched curiously as she entered the compound. Inside, Amara welcomed her politely. As always. Mama Efua sat quietly for several moments. Her confidence seemed smaller than before. Finally she spoke. I need help. The words felt strange coming from her. For years she had been the one receiving. Now she was asking. Amara listened patiently. Mama Efua explained the debts. The creditors. The pressure. The fear. When she finished, silence filled the room. Then something unexpected happened. Amara didn't criticize her. Didn't shame her. Didn't remind her of past mistakes. Instead she offered tea. The kindness almost broke the older woman. Because deep down Mama Efua knew something painful. The woman she had overlooked for years was showing more compassion than she herself had shown. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, shame entered her heart. Not because she lost money. Because she finally saw Amara clearly. And realized how wrong she had been. A week later Amara invited both Kwami and Mama Efua to sit together. The conversation was important. Very important. Because while she was willing to help, she refused to repeat old patterns. Everyone gathered around the wooden table. The atmosphere remained respectful but serious. Amara looked at them calmly. Then she spoke. I will help this family. Both listened carefully. But things must change. Kwame nodded immediately. Mama Efua remained silent. Amara continued. No more secret debts. No more sending entire salaries away. No more treating one household while neglecting another. Her voice remained gentle, yet firm. The kind of firmness built from experience. Not anger. Truth. She explained that healthy families require balance. A son can love his mother. A husband can support his wife. Neither relationship should destroy the other. For nearly an hour they discussed finances openly. Perhaps for the first time ever. When the meeting ended, something unusual had happened. Everyone understood the rules. Everyone understood the boundaries. And most importantly, everyone understood that Amara was no longer the silent woman who accepted everything. She had found her voice. And she intended to use it. With stability returning, Amara focused on growth. Her farmland expanded. Her market business expanded. Soon she hired workers from neighboring villages. Women. Single mothers. Young people seeking opportunities. Families struggling financially. Each new employee represented another life changing for the better. The village admired her success. But what impressed them most wasn't the money. It was what she did with it. She created opportunities. She shared knowledge. She taught others how to save, invest, and build. People began calling her Madam Amara. Not because of wealth. Because of leadership. One afternoon a young woman approached her farm. I want to be like you someday. Amara smiled. Then shook her head gently. No. The girl looked confused. Amara continued. Be better than me. Those words spread throughout the village. And with every passing month, her influence grew larger. The woman once ignored by everyone had become someone others looked toward for inspiration. One evening shortly before sunset, Kwame asked Amara to walk with him. Together they followed a narrow path beside the farmland. The sky glowed orange and gold. For several minutes neither spoke. Then Kwame stopped walking. Slowly he turned toward her. His eyes reflected emotions she rarely saw before. Honesty. Amara. His voice trembled slightly. I failed you. She remained silent. Listen. I kept believing I was a good husband because I worked. He looked down. But I wasn't paying attention. The words came slowly. Painfully. I saw my mother's needs. I saw everyone else's needs. But I didn't see yours. Tears filled his eyes. Not dramatic tears. Real tears. The kind people cry when facing uncomfortable truths. Amara watched quietly. He continued. You built a future while I ignored the present. For several moments neither moved. Then Amara finally spoke. You hurt me. Kwame nodded. I know. But people can change. Another silence. Then she added softly. The question is whether they continue changing after forgiveness. Kwame understood immediately. This wasn't the end of his lesson. It was the beginning. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, they stood together looking across the farmland Amara had built. And for the first time in many years, they looked toward the future as partners. Not strangers. Not opponents. Partners. 2 years passed. The farmland grew. The business expanded. The debts disappeared. But Amara was no longer focused only on success. She was focused on legacy. One morning she stood on a piece of land near the village entrance. Workers moved around carrying cement blocks. Carpenters hammered wooden frames into place. Young laborers unloaded roofing materials. Kwame stood beside her. What are you building? He asked. Amara smiled. A future. Months later the project was completed. A training center. Simple. Beautiful. Practical. Inside were classrooms, sewing machines, farming tools, computers, and small business resources. Women from nearby villages arrived daily. Many were widows. Some were single mothers. Others simply wanted a chance. A chance nobody had ever given them before. Amara personally taught business skills. Budgeting, saving, planning, investment. She shared lessons learned through years of struggle. Years of sacrifice. Years of silent determination. Soon the center became known throughout the region. People traveled from distant communities just to attend workshops. Reporters visited. Local leaders visited. Everyone wanted to understand how one woman had transformed her life and then used her success to transform others. Standing inside the center one afternoon, Amara watched dozens of women learning new skills. And for the first time she realized something. The business she built would one day end. The buildings would age. The land would eventually belong to another generation. But the people she empowered, their impact could continue forever. That was the real legacy. Age has a way of teaching lessons pride refuses to learn. Mama Efia understood that now. She spent many afternoons sitting beneath the large mango tree near her house. Watching village life. Watching children play. Watching women walk to the training center. Watching Amara. The same woman she once underestimated. One day an elderly neighbor sat beside her. "You must be proud." Mama Efia smiled sadly. "Yes." The neighbor nodded. "You raised a good son." For several seconds Mama Efia said nothing. Then she shook her head gently. "No." The neighbor looked surprised. Mama Efia continued. "The strongest person in this family is not my son." She looked toward the training center. "It's Amara." The admission felt difficult. But also freeing. For years she had measured people by what they gave her. Now she understood true value. Character. Integrity. Wisdom. Compassion. Those things mattered more than money. Later that evening she visited Amara. Not to ask for help. Not to discuss problems. Simply to say something she should have said years earlier. "Thank you." Amara smiled softly. "For what?" "For showing me the difference between receiving support and appreciating it." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. And for the first time, their relationship felt genuine. Not built on obligation. Built on respect. Change did not happen overnight. But it happened. Slowly. Consistently. Authentically. Kwame rebuilt his carpentry business. This time with discipline. Purpose. Responsibility. The workshop grew steadily. Customers returned. New contracts arrived. Young apprentices joined his team. People respected him again. Not because he earned money. Because he earned trust. Every morning he woke before sunrise. Every evening he returned home on time. Every decision reflected lessons learned through painful experience. One afternoon a young apprentice asked him a question. "Master Kwami, what is the most important thing a husband should do?" Years earlier he would have answered differently. Now he smiled. Then replied, "Pay attention." The apprentice looked confused. Kwami continued. "Most people don't lose their families because they stop loving them. They lose them because they stop noticing them." The young man nodded thoughtfully. Kwame looked across the farmland where Amara walked with several women. A feeling of gratitude filled his chest. Because life had given him a second chance. And he knew not everyone received one. 5 years after opening the training center, something extraordinary happened. Amara received an invitation from the regional government. At first she thought it was a mistake. Surely they meant someone else. But they didn't. A special ceremony was organized to honor community leaders who had created lasting positive change. Amara's name stood proudly among them. The entire village celebrated. People decorated roads. Women prepared food. Children practiced songs. On the day of the ceremony, hundreds gathered. When Amara's name was announced, applause filled the hall. She walked onto the stage wearing elegant traditional African clothing. Confident. Graceful. Strong. The official handed her an award recognizing her contribution to education, entrepreneurship, and community development. The audience stood and applauded. Kwame watched from the front row. His eyes filled with tears. Not sadness. Pride. The healthy kind. The kind that celebrates another person's success instead of feeling threatened by it. As Amara delivered her speech, she spoke about perseverance, opportunity, self-belief. And one sentence stayed with everyone. Never allow someone else's opinion to become the limit of your future. The crowd erupted into applause. Because everyone knew exactly how much truth existed behind those words. Years later, the village looked very different. Businesses flourished. Women owned farms. Young people started companies. Families became more financially secure. Many traced their success back to one place. The training center. And one person. Amara. One evening, long after the day's work ended, she sat outside her home watching the sunset. Children laughed nearby. Workers returned home. The village felt alive. Peaceful. Hopeful. Kwame joined her carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her. Then sat quietly beside her. Neither spoke for a while. They simply watched the horizon. Finally Kwame smiled. You built all this? Amara looked around. The farms. The businesses. The people. The opportunities. Then she shook her head. No. He looked confused. Amara smiled. I helped people build it themselves. And that was the truth. Her greatest achievement wasn't wealth. Wasn't land. Wasn't awards. It was helping others discover their own potential. As darkness slowly settled across the village, Amara realized something important. Success creates comfort. But impact creates immortality. Long after buildings disappear. Long after money is spent. Long after names fade. The lives you change continue telling your story. And that is exactly what Amara's legacy became. A story carried forward by hundreds of people whose lives were better because one woman refused to let her circumstances define her future.